a good chunk of fly fishing has plastic. So whether that is your line, your net basket, your flies have it in it. It's where you carry your dry flow. Like it's so many parts of it. And it is a simplicity. I mean, same with the grocery store. It's a hard thing to move away from. And with creating our fly boxes, it was researching different plastics because at the end of the day, a lot of our plastics are the forever plastics. And so one kind of avenue we went down is a corn-based plastic. And that kind of helps take away the forever piece.
Hello, and welcome back to the Outdoor Minimalist Podcast. I'm your host, Meg Carney, and I'm an outdoor and environmental writer and author of the book, Outdoor Minimalist, Waste Less Hiking, Camping, and Backpacking. The Outdoor Minimalist Podcast has the goal to give listeners actionable ways to waste less hiking, camping, backpacking, and more during every step of their process. Your impact outdoors starts long before you hit the trail and goes beyond leave no trace ethics. You'll learn how to identify sustainable outdoor brands, how to ask hard questions regarding sustainability, and begin to shift and evolve your mindset to integrate minimalism into all of your outdoor pursuits. So the other day I was chatting with my brother, Alex, who, by the way, if you don't know already, is the audio producer of this podcast. And I mentioned how I felt like we kind of had like a surprising number of anglers that listened to the show and interact on social media, including YouTube. And while I was surprised, all he really had to say was, well, maybe it's because when they're out fishing, they see the direct pollution and impact of littering, waste, etc., of people that don't even recreate outside, but also other fishermen and anglers. And they're just outside trying to enjoy the day, right? So if you're an angler and you listen to this show, I want to know, why you enjoy this podcast, why you enjoy our content. And one easy way to do that is to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. So tell us why you listen to this specific show and how fishing influences your view of the world. And in episode 39, you guessed it, we are talking about fishing. I had the pleasure of sitting down and learning about a unique fly fishing company created by Kaelyn Canner, and it's called Fin River Gear. Kaelyn used her experiences as a female angler working through the trials of learning fly fishing and those of her partner, an experienced conservation-minded angler, to identify some glaring problems with fishing gear and the fishing industry. At Fin River Gear, they research, develop, and market innovative quality products in an affordable range to remedy current gaps in the market. They also aim to combat the abundance of plastics, gender and other biases, and antiquated ideas that are so prevalent in the fishing industry. So thanks for joining me on the Outdoor Minimalist Podcast today, Kaelyn. I am excited to return to fishing topics. I know we have a lot of fly fishermen in the audience, so I think that they'll really appreciate getting a few more insights into how to have a more eco-conscious setup. And so before we get right into that, do you mind explaining how you got interested in outdoor recreation and how it fits into your life now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, Megan. So honestly, my love of the outdoors really comes from being a Colorado native, being born here, and honestly, just having the mountains as my backyard meant we grew up hiking and biking and going up skiing. And none of my family really fished. I think there was an attempt that my dad tried taking me fishing, but instead of actually fishing, I ate all the sandwiches within an hour. So it really didn't start for me till after college when I picked it up a couple of times with friends and tried it, never really fully had somebody teach me. And so with then, my now husband, Leo, it was pandemic. So it was trying to find something that we enjoyed together. And so I was like, hey, do you want to go hiking? And he's like, how about we fishing? He's like, I'd love to hike with a rod in hand. And I was like, okay. So I was like, let's meet in the middle. Let's do fly fishing together. And went out, seemed to go relatively well off the bat. And so from, oh gosh, June of 2020, haven't stopped and generally going once a week, which is pretty good.
Yeah, that's great. And you still live in Colorado now, right?
Yes. So born and raised, haven't yet left. I was like, maybe at some point, goal is to like maybe try out Pacific Northwest. So we'll see when we make it that direction.
Yeah, I mean, there's great fly fishing in both locations, so I don't know, up to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so especially since you haven't been fly fishing your whole life, I am interested to hear about the backstory of Finn River Gear then. What kind of inspired that inception?
Yeah, absolutely. Getting into fly fishing wasn't necessarily approachable off the bat. One thing I ran into was feeling intimidated in fly shops. And going in, you're kind of asking questions. You're new to this, and some people aren't receptive to women. So you kind of figure out what fly shops are willing to have that conversation, are willing to kind of guide you in a sense of, great, give me an idea of what rivers are running well. Tell me about the flows. How does that work? What does that mean for changes in fishing? What flies? And so one part of Finn River was going into these fly shops and kept asking the question of, do you have kind of an all-in-one fly box that I don't need to carry 3 to 4 fly boxes like my husband was at the time, where it's kind of like your small flies, your dry flies, your streamers, everything kind of had its own box. And the more we were talking and fishing together and coming back from a fly fishing trip, it was like, well, we have time. I was like, that was kind of the beauty of the pandemic, was it kind of gave you time to slow down. There wasn't much else going. And that was how Fin River was born of, okay, let's create this all-in-one fly box. Let's make this more approachable, kind of build a different community and get to know other women in this sport, since it generally is a rich white guy sport. And when you walk into fly shops, it's very evident of that in some of the ways that they treat women. Is it's gotten better. I will definitely say it has gotten better over the last few years, but I think that's due to the fishing industry as a whole is gaining momentum. And now, kind of with our little baby of Fin River, was then moving into that eco-friendly space. It's like, okay, if we're going to create something, let's make it a little bit different than what's out there. Let's have compartments, let's have foam, let's add magnets, and let's use an eco-friendly plastic.
Yeah, that's really interesting. There's a lot of pieces there that kind of influenced the creation of the business. And so, do you just make the what are they called? Tackle boxes? Fly boxes? What are I
Yes.
don't know anything about fishing, so it's probably obvious.
No, honestly, and that is just kind of one of the funny things. So we actually do have a tackle box as well,
Mm.
and that's where we have our spin gear. So we do have a little 2-person raft that we'll take out, and it's cute. Because some of the bigger bodies of water, it's more fun to spin fish than it is to fly fish. There's variation, and so with your bigger tackle, which people customarily do know, is going to be kind of your bigger gear, your bigger box, where you're seeing kind of those trays that come out that you kind of remember as a kid. Whereas the fly box is going to be, of course, I have to do a nice little plug, is going to be a lot smaller because we want it to fit in a fly bag, since you're not going to have all of that with you on the river. Whereas you're more trekking, you're doing more distance than you would with a tackle box. So that's kind of the variation, if that helps kind of answer that variation. So technically, tackle is tackle, whereas ours are more flies.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, I see the
Yeah.
distinction going on there. And your, little fly box is quite little indeed. Um, and I'll make sure to link to it in the show notes, so if people wanna see it and, like,
Perfect.
compare to the gear they already have, then they can do that there. And so I guess if we're, like, zooming out, like, away from the business and looking at fly fishing and I guess fishing as an industry, what would you say more than likely has the biggest environmental impact when it comes to fishing and fishing gear?
Yes. So this is such an interesting question because I don't feel like it's the easiest to answer in the sense of everything with fly fishing. Everything might be kind of a loose term, but a good chunk of fly fishing has plastic. So whether that is your line, your net basket, your flies have it in it. It's where you carry your dry flow. Like it's so many parts of it. And it is a simplicity. I mean, same with the grocery store. It's a hard thing to move away from. And with creating our fly boxes, it was researching different plastics because at the end of the day, a lot of our plastics are the forever plastics. And so one kind of avenue we went down is a corn-based plastic. And that kind of helps take away the forever piece. Like obviously with foam and magnets, it's going to be a little bit different of a ball game there. But with so many parts of fly fishing having forever plastics, we just wanted to lessen our impact. So it doesn't exist as much as being conscious of the end result.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that's kind of the feedback that I've gotten from other anglers, I guess, is that, a lot of the gear that requires the use of plastic, and it's hard to escape when it comes to fishing, so just, like, being more mindful of the equipment might be important, and, yeah, do you think there are specific, like, parts of maybe the fly rod or the flies themselves that you would be using that create more waste than others?
Yes, with the rods, fortunately enough, primarily metal cork. So there, I feel like there is an advantage. Plus, you do have a lot of companies that have great warranties on rods. So that doesn't mean if you break your rod, you have to go out and replace the entire thing. So I know we've snapped more than a few rods, mainly on trips. So we have a backup with us, of course. And with that, we've had to replace just like the middle piece. We send it off to the company through a fly shop. We pay X amount for shipping. We get it back with just that piece replaced. So, one part of doing our research with our gear is making sure that we're buying better gear that will last us longer, that we're able to repair. So, getting into picking out my first fly bag. I am a small person and the women patterns on fly gear at the time was not like tie dye necessarily, brighter colors where I've kind of been guided by people in shops and my husband of you don't necessarily want to stand out on the river. You want to be more of the earth tones because if fish can see you, you're not gonna be able to catch them. There's like whole science that I still wear bright colors because to me, I like color. But with picking out the fly bag, the first one I picked out, it worked for a certain amount of time, but I ended up needing to upgrade. And from there, we donate to a newer angler because we kind of view that as pass it down and that way somebody else gets to then use it. And we've picked up some of our gear secondhand. We have a couple rods and reels we picked up that way of people saying, hey, this we only use this a handful of times, save some money there. We're not buying new. And now the fly bag that I have is perfect for me. It fits, but it took some research to find something that I liked that carried enough water. Living in Colorado, I live off of this. So it's kind of all of those pieces of being conscious of your gear, not spending for the sake of spending, because all of those pieces do add up over time. So with our flies, we'll go into the fly shop and ask them what's working, pick out just two of those flies. So we're not ending up with excess. It's really easy to fill up a fly box with stuff that you don't really touch. And it's all of those pieces of asking the right questions. You have the right gear. So you have your setup really honed in and you end up with less stuff. And that's our goal of kind of cutting down that consumer part where you're just ending up with so much.
Yeah, that more mindful consumption feels like it can be really impactful. And when you have a smaller carrying case, that's almost seems like it would be more automatic. It's like, well, I only have this much space, so I should only have so many things. And so you're going to really prioritize the items that you use the most. So, well, I guess would your advice be to people that want to downsize their fly fishing gear or people who are building out a set in order to like prioritize the correct equipment and make sure that they're not buying unnecessary items?
Yeah. With getting into fly fishing, we've partnered with some great groups here in Colorado. Uncharted Outdoorswoman, She's Fly. There's one that I know Leo's done events with, the Project Healing Waters. That's a veteran based. And kind of one of my recommendations is start with a 101. Even fly shops will offer these where you can kind of get your hands on a rod. They'll give you just kind of a really nice, concise start to finish, getting you more comfortable, giving you a better understanding of really what you need to even start. You walk into a fly shop and there are some people that of course will oversell you. I feel like that's most retail in general, but having kind of a starting place to go, hey, I just really want to give this a go. I believe Orvis and some of the fly shops will offer a starter rod that's lower end, but that way it kind of has your full setup. You're going to have line and your reel. It's not going to be anything crazy and at least gets you to the starting point. And most fly shops will answer questions of like, hey, I'm just starting. I'd love to just go. Where would you recommend? And for us, kind of the go to starter is Deckers, and that's an hour outside of Denver. It is heavily trafficked, so fair warning there. But it's kind of a nice way that it's closer to Denver. You can park relatively easily and just get out there, see what works. And most fly shops will then recommend those flies on top of it. But when it comes to just getting comfortable with gear, I mean, you can even buy waders at Costco now, which absolutely blows my mind. And so the first waders that I ever started out with Frog Talks, and that's what's there. And they're a lower end wader in the sense that they're exactly what you need. And so starting with waders and my first pair of boots, I picked up a men's pair from Sierra because I was like, let's save some money. Let's make this work. They were slippery as all get out, but you made it work until you figured out kind of what you even need and what your skill level. Because if you're going to dedicate a lot of time, I would say invest in nicer gear. If you're just going to go out a handful of times by yourself with friends, I'd say don't go too crazy. Save your budget. You can spend so much money in this. Like, fortunately enough, it's not golf where you're having to pay to be there. And nobody cares what your gear is when you're on the river. Nobody pays attention to what your rod and reel is. It really comes down to preference there. But utilizing your local fly shops is huge. Colorado Parks and Wildlife will tell you information about the river. So we will generally check flows. So there's just some starter points, and we're always on Instagram and we're happy to help answer questions. So if anybody ever pops up and is like, I am going to be traveling through, don't know if you have any recommendations, I'll be staying in XYZ, we'll throw out just some like, hey, start with this fly shop. They'll kind of guide you through. I think there is a lot of pieces to this that there doesn't need to be. And I just love some of the fly shops that we have that have really grown through the last 4 years of me getting more comfortable. And even picking up the phone and calling them now, I'm not as fearful. Be like, hey, we're going to run up the canyon. What do you recommend? And usually they're nicer to me now than they are to Leo, which is kind of a fun dynamic and a nice change.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I do know we had Erin from the Uncharted Outdoors Women on the show
Perfect.
a while back. And so people should check out her episode because we
Mhm.
talk all about how more women can get into fly fishing and other sports, outdoor sports that are typically male dominated. And I know that she runs well, not she, but Uncharted Outdoors Women runs like programs in several different states. And so I think that's really great that there seems to be more options and like ways to be guided on these trips. So you don't have to think as much about the gear
Mhm.
and you can more so like enjoy the moment and like learn as you go. And
'Cause we all
I'm
start somewhere. Like, that's the beautiful part is we all start somewhere, and having people to start with makes it so much fun.
It does, yeah. It makes it less intimidating, and you're gonna learn the right way, hopefully, the first time, so you don't have a big learning curve. If you've enjoyed listening to this interview and any of our other interviews on the Outdoor Minimalist podcast, we'd love to hear from you. One super easy and free way to support our content is by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. We thank you for listening to and supporting our work so that together we can create a better outdoor space as we recreate. I know we were talking a lot about gear, but I think that it's important that people understand that they don't need to get all of the things. They can start small. And so once you have invested in your equipment, or maybe you have all the gear already, then what would you say are kind of the best ways to extend the lifespan of that gear?
Oh gosh, that is something we battle because, of course, everything gets dirty. Now coming out of winter into spring, everything gets muddy. Like, my boots still have a layer of mud from when we went a couple weeks ago. But it's just a matter of keeping track of everything and knowing, okay, so my boots are really muddy. I need to wash them off, double check that my laces are still good. Going over my waders to make sure I haven't torn any of the seams because we all fall. It's a thing, something you can't avoid while fishing. But just making sure that everything's good, especially with then fly line, not something I'd ever really considered, but we do this about once a year. So we'll clean our fly line, which is yards upon yards. But it is literally just taking it off of the reel, putting it in just some soapy water. And it is surprising how gross it gets, but it will extend the life of that fly line because the fly line it's can range anywhere from probably 50 to over 100 easily. And the lines weights vary and what it's for, salt water versus fresh water, textured versus not. Not that I really fully understand. Like, I have a setup that works for me, but everybody has their opinion. But even just going through double checking that. And so, with, of course, looking at not wanting to be wasteful, is we keep spools of line on our fly bags. And so, with those spools, is different strength line. So even when we're on the river, it's making sure we're not going to break off because the last thing we want to do is have more line in the river or wherever it magically ends up. So just kind of checking your gear as you go, making sure your fly bag is zipped up so you're not losing gear. We have found so much off the river, whether that's floating, it's we have found a net, we've found boxes of flies. It is just amazing when you're like, how do you not know? So it's making sure all your gear is where it's supposed to be, so you're not leaving stuff on the side of the river. And our belief is just, I mean, it's kind of the same MO of owning a house. If you notice a crack in the wall, what's going on? Is there something going on with the garbage disposal? I mean, every part of life takes maintenance, and we look at fishing as an investment into our time, our company, the earth, and we want to make sure that we take care of all those pieces so we aren't just adding to it.
The part about the like fishing gear being left in the water is has always been so interesting to me, and I understand that you lose things, like, things come off of the rod and, like, the lines break and stuff, but do you have any advice in terms of how people can lower their impact when they actually are out on the water and, like, preventing yeah, like, the lines from just getting, like, stuck in there, or are there ways to retrieve them if they do?
Yeah, you'll see us going out mid river and trying to retrieve stuff if we get stuck on something. I generally have a walking stick with me. I'm not as stable in the river as my husband, so I try to be as safe as possible. But if I get stuck mid river, I will tromp out there get my line, do my best to not leave anything. Because our belief is, I mean, it really is posted at every campsite, every outdoor space is leave Earth better than you found it. Take your whatever you bring in, you take out. So, I mean, most of the time we're taking trash out with us. And it's just a matter of being cognizant of your space. Just do you see extra line? Is there trash down the way? If we do find anything on the river that was previously somebody else's gear, we'll post it on social media just to connect with them and say, hey, we found X, Y, and Z. I'm not sure if anybody's missing it. We were up here. Send us a note. It's rare that it seems like that point ever gets connected, but it's a hard thing to avoid. I don't think that there's like a safe or right answer for how to keep track of your gear, but it's just being cognizant of your space and your gear and just kind of keeping an eye on it. One of the ways that kind of we go about making sure we're not losing line is we use a stronger line, which means that it is going to be, and this is like fish science that is more beyond me, is the stronger your line is the thicker it's going to be, which means it's going to be more visible in the water. So you have a higher potential of fish seeing that, meaning that you're not going to catch as many fish throughout the day. Whereas there's some people who believe more in the number sense of that, where they would rather have thinner line, which ups your possibility of breaking off, which then leads to more waste. So our kind of way of combating that is just making sure that we're using the appropriate line, that we're not going to be adding to the river.
That makes a lot of sense. There's so many parts to fishing that are interesting and a lot to consider and think about as you're investing in gear and equipment. So, how can people, anglers of any level, kind of build out their perfect fly box or like set of equipment so it fits their needs? Because I'm assuming where you live, the type of fish you're looking for, et cetera, can all kind of impact the equipment that you actually want.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it varies state by state and even can vary within states. I know for us, it'll vary per season. There's some bodies of water we won't touch for all of winter, whereas now that we're moving into warmer seasons, we're going back to. So Colorado River is one of those. So it's knowing what flies to have for that. And that kind of goes back to the fly shops. And the beauty is there are some fly shops out there that post social media, whether that's reels or whatever, saying, hey, we had a great time on the river last week. We had great luck with RS2s and chocolate thunders and stoneflies. Like they'll throw out names. And it's kind of one of those just like take note. Or just even go into that fly shop and say, like, hey, I'm gonna go up to the Arkansas. I'd love to know what's working. And you can pick up just a handful of flies if that's where you know you're going. And that kind of avoids just aimlessly going in and picking stuff out. I am an absolute fan of just like I love looking at all everything, but I know for a fact not everything will work. And then you add in salt water. Salt water is its own animal. One of my previous coworkers down in Florida, he was telling me because we gave him a box and was like, hey, take it down there. Let us know what you think. And what he explained is any fly that touches the water down there, he has to then pull out that night and wash off. Otherwise, it will rust and be unusable within days, which blew my mind. And so, again, that kind of goes back to that waste aspect of know your area and know your water. Whereas Colorado, I pull something out, I don't clean that fly, I know it'll still exist. We're great. But salt water, if you're not washing it off at night, that is just going to rust. And so, what we kind of recommend is just reaching out and Uncharted, great option there. Like we've connected with Erin over the last few years and watching her expand to the various states, you can see how much research goes into that, whether that's archery, hunting, fishing, hiking. They do so many variations. And I know that takes a lot of expertise and gear to really make sure that they're guiding people in a very conscious way. But they've been so nice. And like I participated in casting classes even years in because I believe that there's always parts to learn. And even chatting with the gals during that casting class, I'm like, hey, where have you been? So it's even kind of using those networks and those communities to say, like, hey, like I'd love to know what's in your fly box. Are there like a handful of flies you'd recommend I start with going into summer? And kind of tapping into those networks. But again, fly shops have become exponentially more helpful. And so if you just say, hey, I'm looking to only spend $30 today on just a handful of flies. I know I'm going to be heading out here in the next couple of weeks. Is this what you'd recommend?
Yeah, utilizing the locals and kind of trying to build a network of people, I guess, sounds really important. I'm trying to think if there are other specific things that I want to know. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Um, let's see. There was one interesting fun fact that I was looking at last night, actually, because you do have to wonder when you're going out fishing how kind of the ecosystem is maintained. Because there's so many parts that go into having a healthy habitat for fish, for wildlife, for even people to be out there, the trails. And so, kind of one of the things we were looking at is how much really hunting and fishing licenses bring into the states. And I don't think a lot of people always understand what that means. And I know with Colorado, like I carry my fishing license in the back of my phone, so I know it's always with me. But we also have a search and rescue aspect to that. And I think it's like maybe 10 extra bucks to add. And what that entails is if anything were to ever happen and there's an emergency in the backcountry, they'll take care of you for that $10 that you basically paid. So there's pieces that even if you're not necessarily going fishing or hunting or even believe in it, because we've even run into that there people don't necessarily like the fact that we do catch and release and all of those pieces, but it does fund a lot of open space and trails and maintenance and the ecosystems. And even with hunting, you want to have an ideal population. So, whatever is over that ideal population is then going to be tagged for hunters. And then you add any fishing, hunting, sporting goods, there's an excise tax on that. But then the federal government is also contributing to the outdoors. So whether you're buying from small business or a local fly shop or even from a big box store, that excise tax is then put back into open lands, which we fully support in all beliefs. So it's one of those, even if somebody is only going to go fishing once throughout the year, get a license, it supports all of it. And we absolutely love that.
Absolutely. We have talked about that, I think, in a few other episodes. So I'll be sure to link to like all the related episodes to fishing in the show notes. So if you want a more in-depth view to like specifics that Kaylin has mentioned, then listeners can find that there. But I guess with that, how can listeners learn more about you and check out Fin River Gear?
Yeah, absolutely. We have our website, which is finrivergear.com. And we have our store available on there. We are actively working on adding new products. So this is actually our B3. So this is going to be our pocket boxes, but a little bit smaller. And so we have those out there. We also have our sun hoodies, which are a bamboo cotton. And so trying to get out of the polyester and all of that, but still sun hoodie. I wear these almost weekly. And of course, social media. We are very active on Instagram, whether it is people posting fishy photos or tagging us, we'll share them in our stories because we want to make sure that we celebrate the community and whatever that looks like. Even if it's their first fish, their smallest fish, the biggest fish, we support all of it and just a love of the outdoors. And we're happy to engage with that and really partner with anybody who wants to get out on the water or just have a good fishy chat.
I love that. And I'll be sure to link to all of your socials and the website in the show notes as well. But thank you for taking the time to share about Fin River Gear and your journey with fly fishing.
Well, thank you so much, Megan. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. And if you like what you hear, let me know. Leave a review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Instagram at outdoor.minimalist.book, on YouTube, or subscribe to our weekly newsletter at theoutdoorminimalist.com. For even more updates, other educational resources, and to help build an outdoor community with the shared goal to create a better outdoor space as we recreate.